It is official. We are online, everybody. We are
It's
online.
happening.
We are on the information superhighway.
Wow.
You remember when it was called that?
I still call it that. I still think it's the most apt description. I mean,
I know, it makes sense.
Surfing really does bring to mind what it feels like to be on the internet for me. But I mean, a super highway, which is something I don't think even exists in real life. Maybe the Autobahn. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's what it feels like to me whenever I log in to the internet. It's phenomenal. I still get goosebumps every time, actually.
Chills.
I do.
Do you remember the first time you got on the internet?
I remember the first time I had it at my home. It was cool.
Mm-hmm.
All I did was look up. I tried to find some Velvet Underground like bootlegs, and I tried to find a bunch of Pusshead artwork so I could print it out and hang it up in my room and stuff.
That's cool.
I didn't know what the hell you could do with the internet when I first got there. Like, I had some friends that were really geeky, I guess you would say, and they were really into it. And so even before there was necessarily like Alta Vista or web crawler, these are words that might as well be foreign language to anyone under 40 probably.
Yeah.
But before that, there was still the World Wide Web. You could still log on. So my friends were way into it, and they went to like BBSs. I don't know if you ever did that.
Yeah, I never did it, but I remember it.
And they would play like text-based role-playing games, things like that. And so I thought that was all really cool, but it wasn't until search engines and everything was sort of organized that sort of was like, oh, I could use this for something that matters or is cool or whatever. Yeah. How about you? Do you remember your first time surfing the highway?
Well, I would love to actually do real surfing someday.
Yeah.
But now, as far as fake surfing, meaning the internet, I don't remember initially. I know that the first time that I ever really heard of the internet was in my 8th grade keyboarding class with Mr. Schur at West Middle School.
Oh.
And he had Macintoshes, and that was like versions of this was like 94. No,
okay.
No, it would have been 95. Because it was my 8th grade year. I had just been hearing about this thing called the information superhighway then, but some people called it the internet, like it was, or the World Wide Web. I remember that was a big one too.
Yeah.
I remember like on my last day of 8th grade, after we got done with our final, he kind of let us, there was like one computer in the entire computer lab that had access to the internet. He let each of us kind of get on there for 2 minutes just to kind of see what it's about. I was like, this is stupid. What is this? This is
right.
There, I didn't think there was anything about, I was like, what? I thought it was going to be like a fad or something that was going to die out. Like, this is just stuff for nerds, which I was a nerd too. So it was,
and your prediction was absolutely right. I mean,
it is absolutely
after 95.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think I ever heard of the internet again. So
yeah, exactly. It was gone.
Crash and burn on that one.
It was like rap music in the 80s, here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah, just over.
Fad. But anyway, so freshman year of high school, I would go to the computer lab, and I had a very similar experience as you did. Somebody showed me how to use a web crawler, and so then I would search things about my favorite bands, and go to their websites. Like, I remember constantly visiting the Mr. Bungle website.
Oh yeah, I was just about to say the Easter Bunny and the Bowels of Chili.
Bowels Chili. Yep.
Those honestly were probably the first two things I typed into the internet.
Yep. Same here. And I didn't even know about them. Actually, what happened was I typed in Mr. Bungle in the search engine, went to a website, and you know how like the band's websites at that time had like their discography.
Right.
Like there was like news, message board, discography, photos, stuff like that. But
yeah,
I remember that the discography, it listed their demo tapes, and I was like, what?
Right.
There's demo tapes from Mr. Bungle and so I tried to find them. And I remember like, it was like a struggle in those days, downloading was just like a headache. Or,
yeah.
There wasn't anything that even resembles streaming today. Like,
no, I don't even think I could download when I first went on the internet.
No, it was like really like you had to wait for like 5 hours just for like 2 seconds of a song. It was just,
you better hope it's a good 2 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. I just heard Patton scream. Yeah, no. And then after that, I remember like local bands started making their own websites. And then that was kind of the early version of like social media, I would say, where people would get on like bands' message boards and talk shit about them.
Oh,
like,
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember, at least in Muscatine, that's how it happened.
Huh. Yeah.
People, and the thing is like back then you could be completely anonymous. You didn't have to make a profile or anything. Nice. So nobody knew who so you could go on with like multiple names and you could pretend to be other people. Yeah. You could like,
I think the singer's the worst. Oh no, I think that the guitar playing's the worst.
You could actually say that you're like another member of the band.
Yeah, right.
I quit
the band.
Yeah.
So we forgot to introduce ourselves again.
Yeah.
So I'm Eric.
I'm Dan.
And he's Dan.
we both
this
said it at the same
episode is part 2 of They Might Be Giants reviews of the first 8 records. I don't know.
Numero dos.
Yeah. Yep. So this episode, we are talking about the next 4 of the first 8, not to make it confusing, records. Like I said last time, the reason that we sort of picked that time period is because they sort of picked that time period. I feel like when they put out Then, it seemed to me like that was a moment of reflection and of moving forward from that point. So I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, we talked about Self-Titled, we talked about Lincoln, we talked about Flood, and we talked about Miscellaneous Tea. So the next one is Apollo 18 from 1992. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think of that record, Dan? Do you even like that?
Oh, I love Apollo 18. It is. Yeah, dude. I like it a little bit.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely love Apollo 18. I actually can't really say enough good things about it. It has, in my opinion, it is, well, first of all, it's the first album they did with a band, with a backing band, which actually, if I'm remembering this correctly, was called the Band of Dans. Because it was 3 guys named Dan and John. So it's like, which I kind of thought it would have made more sense to call it like the Band of Johns and Dans.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It from beginning to end is one of the most, I would say it's one of the most peculiar They Might Be Giants releases, maybe the most peculiar. It has, it starts off with Dig My Grave, which is kind of like, I think the Elvis Costello thing that we kind of talked about was in like full force on that track. Yeah. Very just, I don't know. I don't know how to describe the kind of music that's going on other than just Elvis Costello-ish.
Right.
It's a very, very fun and upbeat. Then it goes into what I think is one of the most hilariously kind of dark songs that they've ever written. I Palindrome I, which I didn't know for the longest time what a palindrome was.
Oh yeah.
Which of course it's something that reads the same backwards as it does forwards. So
Right.
like race cars a palindrome. So the whole like thing where it's like I am a snakehead eating the head on the opposite side. The first line is just so like I had no idea when I first heard it, but just like someday mother will die and I'll get the money.
Yeah.
And you know, it's so just hilariously dark. But again, it just sounds like they're smiling when they're singing about all this stuff.
For sure.
And it's fantastic. And I can't think of any band that would make me smile at hearing someday mother will die and I'll get the money. Because it just totally sounds like again, they just touch on these subject matters. And then there's She's Actual Size, which is like total, like, you know, like a jazz influence type thing. It's fantastic. Mammal. These lyrics are so like clever that you can't help but being intrigued by them at like the age of like 16 or 17, because honestly, there were no other bands writing lyrics like this and still are not to this day, I don't think. You know, glass of milk, standing in between extinction in the cold and explosive radiating growth. What? Like, you know, it's just like who I think that the Residents influences in full force in some of this stuff, just lyrically. I think it's also in some ways maybe one of the poppiest songs they've ever, poppiest albums they've ever released as well.
In its own way. Yeah.
In its own way. Very, very catchy. The Statue Got Me High, which has an awesome video. Yeah. And then there's like that bizarre sort of like cover of In the Jungle, the Mighty Jungle, the guitar,
sort
The
of
Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Yeah, right.
It's totally awesome. The guitar. And then Dinner Bell, which I think is just hilarious. Yeah. One of my favorite songs is Which Describes How You're Feeling All the Time. That song just blows my mind. Yeah. And then there's that hilarious, like, again, hilariously dark song, Turn Around.
Oh yeah. I love Turn Around.
Just
absolutely.
So it's like it's got like weird, like comedic horror vibes or something. Yeah. Like I can't really describe, you really just have to listen to it, you know, for yourself. Sure. And then of course, I mean, we can't not talk about Fingertips in Spacesuit. Yeah. Fingertips, which is like this collection of like anywhere between 10 to like 25-second songs that has a bunch of like guests on it. And it's just absolutely incredible and mind-blowing. Yeah. It blows my mind how they were able to put a lot of this album together. I would also say it's like the most rhythmically, I guess, complex album or melodically complex album that they've ever released, if that makes any sense. Like I don't know if anyone's ever tried to play I Palindrome I on just the acoustic guitar and nothing else, but it is insane. I wasn't able to accomplish it. And there's so much going on this record. There's just all these like little, like, you know, the melodies are insane. And there's just all this stuff that's kind of added, like that I feel is the foundation. And we use this word foundation. It was all laid with the first 3 records. I also feel like when they added the band, it really allowed more room for the 2 Johns to do a lot of different like weird experiments. I feel like this was kind of like a mad scientist record. You know, it's like they were just in this like musical lab and they were just like, okay, now that we got all these other things going on besides just the drum machine or whatever, let's see what we can do and what we can get away with, you know? Right. Such a fantastic record. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Apollo 18?
Yeah, I love Apollo 18. The things that I like you said about the Residents, I do feel that's sort of reemerged on this record for the first time since the first record, at least to this extent, especially like with Fingertips. Very much like the commercial album. I mean, same premise. Pretty much. Other things I like, I do think they leaned into that Elvis Costello thing even more. We talked about I Palindrome I, but when I mean, just the delivery of that, just like someday mother will, like it's like exactly like an Elvis Costello song. It just
Very
is,
much so.
you know. And I do like the band element on this album a lot. And I might have other things to say about that on the next record we talk about. But on this one, I do think they really held true to the goofiness and that sort of idea that I really like, that each melody has its own sound, you know? And I think it's a really creative record. I also think something that's really cool about this one is more than the other records that I can think of, the subject matters are a little more external, if that makes any sense. I feel like before this record, we don't know exactly what they're talking about.
Right.
Most of the time. Like I literally will never know what the song Cowtown's about. I don't.
Right.
And there's a chance that they don't know what the song Cowtown's about. Fine. But on here, it's like there's a lot going on as far as psychoanalysis and therapy and things. Like I Palindrome I is specifically, I can't remember what it is, but it's specifically about some therapist research into almost like Oedipus elements and things like that.
Okay, now that I did not know.
Yeah, and like
makes a lot
mammal
of sense.
obviously is very much a scientific discussion about mammals. The Statue Got Me High is specifically about the movie 2001. You know, Dinner Bell is about Pavlov and Pavlov's dog. There's a little, and I'm sure all their songs have something that they're about, but this was the first time I was ever like, oh, I know what they're talking about. And that's kind of nice. I think it opens it up a little bit and it made it almost smarter in a way. Sometimes I think like parameters actually show off what you're doing more than just having a free form thing. I don't know if that makes any sense, but especially in things like painting or whatever, if you can have parameters that show what you're trying to accomplish, then those things can be shown. If you can just do anything you want, people might be like, I don't know if they're good or bad, you know?
Sure.
So, and so that comes through on this a little bit more.
Sure.
It's not, for me, it's not as goofy, but they still are very, very goofy, especially like Turnaround, the whole graveyard scene.
Yeah.
You know, which I do imagine what they're talking about in my head. Very, I don't know, the language that they use is you imagine what's happening.
Well, I think
that's
more
cool.
more than any other record up to this point, and actually I would even say more than any other They Might Be Giants album, the lyrics are just so descriptive on like every single song. It's not even just this, it's like Mammal, like puts you in mind of like just being in science class or something, or a museum or whatever. There's just a very visual like element to the lyrics, and even like in like Fingertips, you know, when it's like you know, I turned around and found the thing that made the sound, or like, you know, what's that blue thing doing here, you know, like you
it's almost like those 2-sentence horror stories or whatever, you know.
Exactly. Like you're just, but Turnaround is definitely the best example of that on this record.
And I also like that there's songs that seem very much like just regular songs. And I again, I'll talk about that when we get to the next record, but on this, I like how normal some of these songs are. And I think it's because it's offset by like Narrow Your Eyes.
Oh man.
Great song.
Yes.
But wow, very normal, you know? Exactly. And like even See the Constellation is sort of just a rock song, and Dig My Grave is interesting and cool, but it's not weird or goofy, you know? And so I think they're kind of figuring that element out too. So I think I think this is a really cool moment for
very much
They Might Be Giants. So, and obviously just a great record with great songs. This, I love putting this one on. I love singing along. So
me too. Anyway, I forgot to mention my favorite song off of this album.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it's nearly damn impossible. It's such a good record that I don't know if I can pick a single song. So I'm going to have to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to have to make it oh man, this is difficult. I think I'm going to have to say it's between Which Describes How You're Feeling and I may have to make it a 3-way tie, Mammal or I Palindrome I. Those 3 songs are just like incredible to me. But I also really like See the Constellation like a lot.
It is a cool song.
I mean, it's and then that little Spider.
Yeah, Spider's
that
good.
one.
Yeah.
Again, like that's got like this visual element. You just
you
picture some sort of cult or something.
Oh, I always pictured like a speed racer, almost like a 60s anime.
Oh yeah, that I can see that too.
But that's kind of the joy, of it. It's like it happens in your head.
I can totally see that too, especially with the music, because it almost has that like 60s sort of like 60s cartoon feel to it.
Yeah.
But like that, like that's the great thing is that I feel like a lot of this stuff, in addition to being very descriptive, is almost open to interpretation.
Yeah. I think my favorite song on here is The Statue Got Me High. I really like it. I really like that it's about one of my favorite movies. But yeah, I do like most of the songs on here. Like see the Constellation, but I think it must be Dee Dee Ramone, right? That sample, or they could have just emulated his counting or whatever. But it's just like it's so cool, and almost every song on here, I never
really
knew
that was. I never knew that was Dee Dee Ramone. That's really cool.
It just sounds like when you listen to their live recordings, and it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be just about anyone, but it always reminded me of that anyway. Yeah, and Fingertips is, I've had not that many more enjoyable experiences than singing Fingertips word for word with my friends. So
same here. Or just hearing it for the first time. I remember just like I had to listen to it like several times. Yeah. Like over again the day that I heard it.
Yeah, pretty mind-blowing. So
it is. It really is.
Yeah. All right. Well, what do you think, John Henry?
So John Henry is an album that I won't spend a lot of time on because it is, at least from this era, probably my least favorite album from They Might Be Giants. I think that this is just kind of a theory that I have.
Yeah.
I think that after they got the band, they got the weirdness out of them, which was the amazingness that is Apollo 18, the very creative side of using the band. I think this might have been the era where the two Johns maybe kind of started to express some desire to sort of maybe do some other projects besides They Might Be Giants, because this was around the same time that both Linnell and Flansburgh put out side projects and solo albums. And like Linnell put out the State Songs album around this time. And then I also think Flansburgh was doing this other project called Monopuff, which
I like It's Fun to Steal record.
Yeah, it's fun to steal. It's very interesting stuff. I think that maybe had an effect on the overall sound and sort of direction of this album. It's a very bloated record that I do feel it could benefit, I think, from maybe being around 10 songs shorter. There is 20 songs on this album. And by the end of it, it does start to wear thin very quickly. And it also, I would say from this era anyway, when you were talking about the presence of like normal songs on Apollo 18, I think that they took that approach very heavily on this album. I think it's the most normal sounding record.
Mhm.
I also think that there really wasn't, out of like every They Might Be Giants album, even if it wasn't like intentional, I kind of feel like there was a theme kind of going on there, like not a concept, was like loose themes that were kind of occurring like with the first 4 albums.
Mhm.
And I kind of feel like John Henry, it just felt more like a collection of songs than say like the first 4 albums,
Mhm.
which I felt each of them, each song connected with each other in its own sort of way, if it makes sense.
Mhm.
I feel like there was some experimentation going on with John Henry that never happened with They Might Be Giants before.
Mhm.
And there are some songs that I just think are just really boring and honestly just don't do it for me.
Right.
That being said, though, I think there's some gems
Oh yeah.
all throughout this record. I think AKA Driver
Mhm.
is really fun. I think the opening track, Subliminal, is really fun. I love I Should Be Allowed to Think. I think that's maybe one of my favorite songs. I also really love Unrelated Thing, which basically sounds like a country song and nothing else. It doesn't really sound like a They Might Be Giants song at all. In fact, I feel that song, if this album would have been given a promotional push, I think that could have been like a lone hit for They Might Be Giants. Like, I really think Unrelated Thing could be on the radio. It's really that, like, just, I'm not going to say generic, but generic in comparison to the other.
Sure.
It's generic's not the word I'm looking for. That, I don't know, that
it's
normal,
more accessible.
There we go. That's a
sure.
better way to put it. I think I Spy is a really fun one. Oh, Do Not Forsake Me. I think it's weird and
it's very funny.
It's funny and weird. And
I
also really like Meet James Ensor. And then I would have to say, I mean, The End of the Tour is really good. I think the last like 4 songs on the album are really good. Like Window, that's hilarious too. But my favorite song on this record, hands down, is Stomp Box.
Oh yeah.
Which is like the most punk They Might Be Giants have ever sounded, as far as I'm concerned. It almost sounds like it could be like a Minutemen song or something. You know, it's really, really cool. But this is, I think, it's just one of those records. It's not a bad record by any means. I still put it on from time to time, and it's a record that I really have to be in the mood for. Whereas like the other 4 records, while I do have to be in the mood to listen to They Might Be Giants in general, but the first 4 records I can just put in any one of them at ease. And, you know, with John Henry, I really have to kind of work to get that listen in.
Right.
If that makes any sense. So Stomp Box is hands down my favorite one on this track. It's also, I think, the most unique one on the entire record, which is kind of interesting because it's compared to anything else besides They Might Be Giants. It's a pretty normal song, if that makes any sense. Like it's a normal kind of punk song. Compared to anything, you know, compared to the other They Might Be Giants, anything else that They Might Be Giants has done, it's rather normal. But I think it's the most unique thing on this record.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are your thoughts on John Henry?
So John Henry traditionally has been a record that I also am not that into. But I did listen to it since we decided to do these episodes. I have listened to it 4 times, which is quite a bit in a week.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But because I really wanted to like it. Like I have this problem where if I don't like something and other people seem to like it, I assume that there's something wrong with me. But if I love something, I can see it or hear it once and be like, that was amazing, and never really revisit it. Not for years. So that's kind of a weird thing. But so yeah, I did revisit it and I came away from it with a few ideas. First of all, like you said, I think this could be half the length. And I'm not saying that those songs should be cut because they're bad. I just feel like with the other They Might Be Giants records that we've talked to up to this point, you're given, okay, this is going to sound really strange, but it's kind of like a litter of puppies or something. Like you're just given these 10 to 12 things, and they're just these little cute things, and they're all different and they're all interesting, but they're all connected by something, you know? And that's how I felt about the other records. It's like, here's your songs. And I know technically Apollo 18 has a lot more songs, but that has to do with fingertips mostly. But
right.
And they usually come in at about a half an hour, and you're just like, it's like you're being let into They Might Be Giants world a little bit with those records. It's just like, here's what we got. Here, have them. And then, that's it. And you feel like it's a little gift, and all these songs are just little vignettes of fun ideas. I don't know. This one, on the other hand, seems really long, and like the songs don't seem as dear. They don't seem as quaint, just like something that you hold in your hand and you inspect it. And there's things you like at first, and then there's things you like later, and there's stuff you didn't realize about it for years, and this one seems a lot more surface to me, if that makes any sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
The other element of it is just a feeling I get from this was they really leaned into having a band. And like I said, I've never obviously met any of the Johns, Linnell, Flansburgh, or Henry. And so I can't say whether or not this is what happened, but it seems to me that they said it must have been a collective idea of, all right, well, let's write They Might Be Giants type songs, but we're a rock band now. So in one way that sounds like a good idea, but anytime you try to write songs like yourself, you have become a parody. And I think that comes through on this sometimes. Like there are songs that sound like other songs by They Might Be Giants. Like I ran into this with the Black Sabbath record 13 that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
Every song sounded like an old hit. It was like, oh, this is the new Iron Man, or this is the new Fairies Wear Boots, or this is like, it was, you could hear what song they based the new songs off of.
Right.
And so that seems to come up for me a little bit through this album. So anyway, and so I also feel like when they are just playing as a full band and they're just playing these songs, they can't hide their influences at all. Like some songs literally sound like Elvis Costello. For the most part, this all kind of ends up sounding like the Young Fresh Fellows to me. Like I feel like I should just be listening to a Young Fresh Fellows record.
Yeah.
Or some other, like Cake, or I don't know, like just a kind of goofy band,
Black Sabbath.
Even Weezer at times. Like it just sounds like a band. And I realized that that's not really what I like about They Might Be Giants. Like if I just wanted to listen to a quirky college rock band, I would.
Yeah.
But I don't. So yeah. So this record in general, I didn't enjoy it as much. But with that being said, there are amazing, amazing songs on it. I think Subliminal is really cool. Yeah, I think Unrelated Thing is cool. Extra Savoir Faire is a really fun song.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I kind of like Thermostat, sort of, but it does get a little just a regular band kind of.
Honestly, I don't. Yeah. This is the only They Might Be Giants album where I can say there are songs on it that I don't even know.
Right.
Like I don't even remember what Thermostat title sounds like.
Right.
Yeah.
But absolutely my favorite song is I Should Be Allowed to Think. I've had it in my head now for a week and a half nonstop. Wake up with it in my head. So
and there's so many.
Yeah.
That's the most They Might Be Giants sounding song on the whole record. Yeah. That and Meet James Ensor, which
right.
I have to say that I forgot to mention this when I was talking about John Henry, has some of my favorite They Might Be Giants lyrics ever.
Yeah.
Meet James Ensor, Belgium's famous painter. Dig him up and shake his hand. Appreciate the man.
Yeah.
They're encouraging people to be grave diggers.
Yeah. Well,
It's hilarious. It just,
yeah, they talk
the
a lot about
absurdity of
graves, though.
they really do. They're actually more the problem than mayhem, I would say.
I would say so too.
No, but in all seriousness, though, that is such a clever, again, that's just so clever. Like, okay, here's someone who's dead that I'm going to write a song about. So let's just encourage people to dig him up and shake his hand. It's so absurd. And then I Should Be Allowed to Think also has some great lyrics too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's the thing is like, if this were a Young Fresh Fellows record, it would be probably my favorite one. So
yeah,
it's just that for me, it doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't have the right feel. And I think they were leaning into writing more like sad songs and stuff too. I think we have a little bit of more leaning into the sadness coming in, you know.
I agree. But it was clear that when it came to nerdy bands in '94, Weezer won that year, man.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I mean, if Buddy Holly were on this record, it would not sound out of place at all.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So
you're right.
You know, I think I just don't think I like They Might Be Giants as a rock band. I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. So.
I could definitely see that. I could definitely see that point of view for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's move into 1996. Ooh, a 2-year break for these guys.
Yeah.
Factory Showroom.
Factory Showroom. Man, I love Factory Showroom also. I feel that after they got John Henry out of their system, I feel like they went back to the drawing board and they did exactly what they should have done with John Henry, utilizing the full band, which is, we talked about making the album close to half the length, and just really cutting out all the meat, all the excess fat and gristle. But I feel, you get what I'm saying. Like that's exactly the feel of John Henry. But Factory Showroom came in, it's probably the shortest They Might Be Giants album, or one of them anyway. It's only got 13 songs, which is the perfect length for this record. And the songs are just from beginning to end absolutely incredible. And I feel like this is the best showcase of utilizing the full band with They Might Be Giants. It starts off with SEXXY, which is just, it's something very different for They Might Be Giants, but still has a very They Might Be Giants sort of take on what it is they're doing, which is essentially, this could be like a Funkadelic song or something, or like a Prince song or something like that, Yeah. It's very, very in that vein. And then it goes into one of my favorite They Might Be Giants songs, Till My Head Falls Off, which the Elvis Costello thing still is very strong here. But the song right away, you can just tell from the opening 2 tracks of this album, the songs are just going to be much stronger here. I think the production is very just tight. I think that the direction, they clearly had a direction, or at least discussed, it sounds like they put a lot of thought into the songwriting this time, which I'm not saying they didn't do that with John Henry, but it really sounds like maybe they even sat down with John Henry and said, okay, this is what we did, sort of what we could do better with this idea of us being as close to a rock band as They Might Be Giants is going to get. Yeah, songs like Exquisite Dead Guy, that is all more Residence type stuff, I would say. But also has this just incredible production behind it. Metal Detector, How Can I Sing Like a Girl, New York City, which for the longest time had no idea that was a cover.
Yeah, right.
And I don't even know who the original band is. Do you, Eric?
Shit. No, I'm gonna look it up. But I don't remember.
Yeah. Then there's XTC versus Adam Ant, which I think is, I mean, anybody who's familiar with like XTC or Adam Ant, that raises eyebrows right there, you know. Spiraling, James K. Polk. I mean, yeah, this is just from beginning to end fantastic. I also like the fact that they had that one song, The Bells Are Ringing, recorded at the Edison Laboratory.
Oh, that was I Can Hear You, right?
Or I Can Hear You. Yeah. What did I say? Did I say The Bells Are Ringing?
Yeah.
The Bells Are Ringing is the last track, which is all equally just as amazing. If you're into just strange, at times kind of, I don't know, if you're into like, you know, I would almost say radio friendly pop, but not really. And maybe something a little touches of like just kind of something odd thrown in, like almost like at times I hear references to like sonically maybe to something like the Beach Boys kind of going on. I also hear like, you know, just straight up pop music. Like we joked a little bit about like the Proclaimers, I Would Walk 500 Miles. I think there's songs on this record that are that strong in terms of like, I could hear this on the radio. But I think the lyrics may just be a little too weird, you know, because it is They Might Be Giants. But yeah, this is from beginning to end, just pure pop perfection from They Might Be Giants, I would say. Pure pop perfection. If They Might Be Giants are going to make a pop record with their full band, this is what I want to hear. And it still holds up today. But my favorite song on the entire thing is definitely Your Own Worst Enemy. Yeah. Hands down. Just
cool song.
Blows my mind. What do you think of Factory Showroom, Eric?
Yeah, I love it too. And it's funny because this is easily one of my favorites. But there are two songs that I actually just don't care for. SEXXY and XTC versus Adam Ant.
Oh, you don't like either of those, huh?
Yeah, I just kind of I like Flansburgh's guitar playing, okay? But when I feel like a song was written or at least diverges a lot just to showcase it, it kind of bugs me. Yeah. And both of those very much like it feels like we had this good song and then the last minute straight is just going to be Flansburgh going crazy on a guitar, which is fine. It doesn't matter. I like them good enough or well enough. I mean, and the rest of the songs absolutely destroy. So, but I usually skip those. So I feel bad about that, but you know, that's how it is. But yeah, this album I think is just amazing. I think all of these songs, Till My Head Falls Off, we talked about the imagery that they bring into their songs, and Till My Head Falls Off, I see the whole song play out in my head. I see someone patting down their overcoat before they leave the house. I see someone in the bathroom leaning their head on a shower stall. I see them falling out the window. Like, yeah, me too. It's gorgeous. It's amazing stuff. How Can I Sing Like a Girl is just a really fun and pretty song. I think this might be my favorite one to sing along to. Like, I think their voices are really, I don't know. I mean, they've always been fully developed, but it's like they're pushing them a little further or something. And it's really great. Exquisite Dead Guy is a fun thing, you know, and it also shows, you know, their commitment to the avant-garde and intellectualism and things like that, because, you know, Exquisite Corpse is an old parlor game for the intellectuals and stuff. So I think I always thought that was cool. Metal Detector, again, they kind of get back to this mystery song thing. Like, we don't know what the hell that song's about. I mean, I guess it's about finding fuselage on the beach, right? With a metal detector. I don't know. New York City is a cover. Cub was the name of the band.
Cub.
That. Yeah.
I was thinking it was somebody else, but
yeah, I sort of did too, but that's what the old internet said. Your Own Worst Enemy is gorgeous and beyond sad. It's really an amazing, cool song. Spiraling Shape takes you a lot of places, and probably one of the most fun outros of which They Might Be Giants are really good at their outros. They usually have rounds and they have different parts coming in, and it's like really, a lot of fun. Like, it's like Birdhouse in Your Soul has the same sort of thing. It's like it just keeps going and you're like, screw it, I guess I'm just gonna sing along because it's so fun. Pet Name 100% is an Elvis Costello song.
Oh, I forgot about that
and
one. Yes.
Actually, it sounds a lot like Monopuff too.
Yeah.
So I would say if you like Pet Name,
at times a lot like Elvis Costello.
Yeah, which is funny because I always think of Linnell's voice as being the one that's the most Elvis Costello-y. But I Can Hear You is a cool song, like you said, recorded at Edison. And I always thought it was really funny because here's how I imagine it. Sometimes when I'm talking to someone and they utter a ridiculous phrase like about the situation, I will say to them, wow, no one has ever said that in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And so that song's sort of like that. It's like these lyrics that if someone during Edison's time heard someone say, they'd be like, what in the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Like,
and
this car is protected by
Viper.
I was just going to say nonsense.
It's nonsense, but it's also great because it's like, it's a reference that I feel like nobody who was alive in like, who wasn't alive in 96 is going to even understand.
That's true.
Those commercials where it was like, this car is protected by Viper, right. And I totally forgot about that.
But then also just like, I'm calling you from the plane. I'll call you when I get there.
When I get there. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, it really doesn't. It's so, so ridiculous.
I just have always loved that sort of, competing elements of that song, like super of the moment lyrics. And because of the way it's recorded, you sort of have to think of that time period. Like, no one had ever been buzzed into a house. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So, and then The Bells Are Ringing is, it's really a cool song. It's really, the arrangement is cool. I love how mysterious it is. I adore it. My favorite song on here though is Spiraling Shape. It's because I don't know what the hell it's about, but it certainly seems to be about something. And in my mind, it feels like it could have to do with the movie called Dark City, which is a super underrated sci-fi type movie and one of my favorites. And so it at least brings that movie to my mind when I'm hearing it, even if it has nothing to do with it. But Factory Showroom, super killer.
Interesting fact. I was actually thinking about picking that song as my favorite also.
Oh yeah.
Spiraling Shape is my second favorite. And then I would have to say that Till My Head Falls Off is my third.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that too.
What a great record this is. All right. So that leaves us with Then the Early Years.
Yeah. Then.
Is that correct?
That's right. Then?
Okay. Yeah. Well, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one either because we pretty much went over it with Miscellaneous Tea, except for a few things.
Yeah, except for a few things.
First of all, this is a double CD that was released. And the first CD has the entire first album, self-titled one. And then it has some I don't know if they were just outtakes or B-sides that were kind of recorded. And then it sounds like kind of like a demo tape sort of thing that they released.
Yeah.
And I mean, the first album, is awesome. We talked about that, of course. You want to know our opinions on the self-titled, I refer you to last week's episode.
Yeah.
But, and then also with a lot of these songs, I refer you to last week's episode when we talked about Miscellaneous T. Hey, Mr. DJ, I thought you said we had a deal. And a bunch of others are on that as well. But the demo tapes and the stuff like that, I don't think everything is on Miscellaneous T.
Right.
And to be honest, I don't remember. I actually went through a period of time where I listened to this pretty religiously. But there's a lot of really, really great stuff on this. I mean, the songs are, you can definitely tell that this was done in a period of time where the two Johns were just having fun with, this idea that just sort of popped up, this musical idea, which I don't know if it was called, well, obviously it was called They Might Be Giants then because it says so in the Critic intro. But I mean, you can tell that, they were developing and laying the foundation for the first two albums really heavily, and they were still trying to find their place, but there's such a sense of like urgency and a sense of just like youth on these songs. There's a lot of messing around. It kind of sounds like very much a sense of humor.
Yeah.
But then there's also like some really great songs like Nightgown of the Soul and Moon and It's Not My Birthday. And by the way, I should also add the second CD includes Lincoln, the entire Lincoln. Then it's more songs and then another kind of demo tape. There's these hilarious intros on the demo tapes. I'll Sink Manhattan. I love Birds Fly. One of my favorite songs is Mr. Claw. I mean, really, like it's pretty much everything that I mentioned with Miscellaneous T. Just almost everything almost everything on this is on Miscellaneous T except for a few things. But in all honesty, my recommendation would be just to buy this.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
This has stuff that isn't on Miscellaneous T, and I think that it pretty much went for pretty cheap for being like a double album.
Yeah, I think so too.
But yeah, a lot of really great songs. Where the Replacements is on here. And so since Hey Mr. DJ, I thought you said we had a deal, is technically still going to be my favorite song on here.
Gotcha.
I mean, that hasn't changed. I am going to do more of an honorable mention. And I'm going to say that I love the Critic intro. Yeah. On the first demo tape. Yeah. On the first disc.
It is really cool. It's like the warbly tape one, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the one where it's like every once in a while, a band comes along that changes the course of human history.
Right.
And it's like so many things I can't understand. They left my teeth chattering for more. And it's like this, it's almost like an audio, like, I don't know. It sounds like it definitely is like this almost like hype sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it must have been like an introduction for a live show, would be my guess.
Yeah, exactly. That I was gonna say like a movie, but definitely. Well, that's what it reminds me of, and it's like they refer to themselves as the twin quasars of rock. I think is awesome. Yeah, I just you guys got to hear it, man. It's great.
Yeah, it is good, and I think this release represents it. Okay, it exists because streaming did not exist in 1997. You know what I'm saying? Like now you would just listen to Lincoln, or you would just listen to the self-titled, or you would listen to Miscellaneous T. But that wasn't the way it was. Like if you wanted, maybe you had the other ones on cassette like I did, you know, and it was like, oh, here I can get the first 2 records plus all this extra stuff on 2 CDs. It made a lot of sense. Now it's like, well, I mean, we have all this stuff in other places. We don't really need to consider this as another, like almost like another release or something. But at the time it was a really big deal to have both of these records and all this extra stuff in, you know, a single CD case. And you know, it was really cool that they put this out. And I think it sort of started an element of backwards looking or archiving for They Might Be Giants. I think it sort of became in this moment a way to regroup and figure out what they wanted to do before Mink Car came out, you know, because Severe Tire Damage is also sort of a collection. Long Tall Weekend was a internet only release. The Working Undercover is sort of a collection again, and that puts us all the way up to like 2001. So
yeah,
and I do understand the Long Tall Weekend is original. It's not a rehash or a re-release or anything, but a lot of people at the time didn't hear it. Again, we didn't have streaming, and it was like I think it was the first internet only release. Is that accurate?
I believe so.
Yeah, or at least one of them.
I believe it was actually the first one.
So then I do think it represents a moment in time where this sort of release had a purpose. Now it doesn't necessarily have a purpose, but you might as well listen to it, you know, like you might as well listen to all the extra stuff.
Yeah.
And there is some really cool stuff on here too, especially like just the radio spots and stuff like that. I think that the old timey fans of They Might Be Giants really appreciated having their hands on some of these songs and other outtakes and things like that. So I thought it was a really cool release at the time. So and Nightgown of the Sullen Moon is my favorite. It's a beautiful and super killer song. And the story of it, as I understand it, was one of the Johns saw a kid's artwork and it said Nightgown of the Sullen Moon on it. And they were so taken with this eloquent phrase that they wrote the song about it. Then they found out that it was a children's book already. So they didn't write it because of the book. They didn't even know it was a children's book. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, really, really cool song. One of my favorites. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the conversation I wanted to delve into is just how ahead of the curve They Might Be Giants were with a lot of stuff, because you mentioned the whole thing about streaming. I also think that if you think about it, and that's a really, really good point about this release, I also think that that's kind of why Dial-A-Song existed back then, was because there really wasn't anything, you know, there weren't people who were like putting out like, you know, sort of like skeletal parts of like, or like incompleted versions of songs yet. You see what I'm saying? Like
right
now there's YouTube channels that are dedicated to like bands that are recording their new album, and they do like daily vlogs that show them in the studio while they're like working on parts to like new albums. And Dial-A-Song kind of was like, you know, sort of that. It was sort of like almost like, hey, look at us in our development. Because a lot of the songs that appeared on Dial-A-Song back in those days were early versions of songs that appeared on albums later.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, it kind of, I think that, and then also I was going to mention the Long Tall Weekend, about them being like the first band to actually actively use the internet in such a way that, you know, you were actually hearing their album on the internet, which at the time was completely unheard of. It was very controversial because this even predated Napster, I believe.
Yeah, I would think so.
It's like, everybody was just like, are you guys insane? Like
Right.
it really was like that much of a reaction. Like you guys aren't going to put a physical copy of this Long Tall Weekend out. Like what's going on? And
I think the popularity of the record reflects that. Unfortunately,
unfortunately, yes.
I've only heard it a couple times myself, you know.
Yeah,
and
it's on Spotify now.
Right.
Yeah, back then it's like, but at this point, it's like we're older, and it's like it would have been more exciting to hear a new They Might Be Giants.
I think so too. Yeah. I don't know though. It's like the lineage of making that decision might ultimately be more important than all of us liking that record.
I think so. I think so because
I don't know. You know,
I mean, there could be a possibility that is what inspired Napster and the streaming services.
Who knows?
Could very well be. At the time, that was like a really bold decision. That was like something that record companies hated at that time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like they were talking about then. Like I remember when that came out, people were like, "Oh, well, I guess their career is over."
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, and then pretty much it didn't. It ended up not being that way for a while. But I mean, they may have, you know, sort of suffered a little bit for a couple of years. But then they put out Meat Car, which actually enjoyed quite a bit of success because of like the song Older was kind of being played everywhere. I also want to give kind of an honorable mention to Meat Car. That's the last album that I really had a huge relationship with in terms of listening. I bought that album when it first came out and listened to it quite a bit. And I got to say, there's some really great stuff on that record too. It definitely does not hold up like Factory Showroom does, but there's some really great stuff. So I would still recommend giving Meat Car a spin if you guys are into it.
I think Meat Car is pretty good. And honestly, I think I just have to do a little work and catch up on my They Might Be Giants. I will say that I haven't even heard one since The Spine. I think The Spine was the last thing I actually even listened to. I probably should go back and listen to everything, but I think that the joy that They Might Be Giants has given me in my life probably deserves me putting in a little bit of effort and listening to the rest of the records, you know? And I kind of have a feeling that it's going to end up feeling like John Henry. Like I'm going to like 3 or 4 songs on the record and that's just the way it is. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because I am older and these things hit you differently, you know?
Could be, man.
I don't know.
I think I will probably say that I'll eventually check out the They Might Be Giants albums that I've never heard.
Yeah.
And then just end up not doing it like everything else.
Good plan.
And maybe I will. Who knows? I actually tried doing it once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't take.
Not really. I got through, I think, the first like 3 or 4 songs of, well, was it The Spine that followed up Meat Car? Does The Spine have that song Memo to Human Resources?
Yes.
So I remember that song I really liked.
Well, the big reveal, you have to decide which of these records was your favorite.
Oh, that's easy for me. Apollo 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
That easy.
It's always been my favorite one.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I also chose Apollo 18. But it was damn near just a 6-way tie. I got to be honest. Or 5-way tie. Like I love Factory Showroom. I love it. It's my favorite one to sing along with. I love Lincoln so much. I don't know. It's super hard, but at the end of the day, I think Apollo 18 is the pinnacle for this time period. I think that they're just firing on all cylinders, you know?
Yeah.
They have the freedom of having a real band playing with them, but they're still stuck in the songwriting modes of their older stuff. And so it sounds like They Might Be Giants still. I don't know. It is super amazing. So
Yeah. Well, there you have it, folks. They might be giants.
there you have it. Part 2.
Part 2. There you have it. And yeah, those of you who haven't heard They Might Be Giants, I strongly recommend you check them out. And I would love to hear if there are any first time They Might Be Giants listeners.
Oh, yeah.
Because of this podcast, I would love to hear what your thoughts are.
That would be very cool.
And if there are any, big fans of They Might Be Giants that listen to this podcast, let us know your experience. I would like to hear that.
Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we talked about They Might Be Giants quite a lot. So
I think we really did. As usual, if you want to talk with us, hit us up on Instagram or Facebook or whatever you want to do. And if you have any suggestions, comments, ideas, let us know.
Yeah. And this show is available on pretty much anywhere you find podcasts. So
yes. Thank you for listening, everyone. Our next episode is going to be with Sam Kester.
Yeah, an interview with the one and only Sam Kester.
You guys have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. They left my teeth chattering for more.